Hello and a very warm welcome back to the garden. So last night I was on YouTube, as I usually am, and this video popped up by one of my absolute favourite gardeners, David the Good, but he's based in Florida, but I love to kind of get different ideas. And he probably had the best introduction to a YouTube video that I've seen for a while, but I don't think David knows how important the topic is. Well, he does know, that's why he's made a video about it, but I don't think the gardening community knows just how important the topic is. The title of his video was Just Let It Die, so this is already going to be quite an interesting one. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play the intro to that video, so you can kind of get a sense, and then this is kind of going to be a little bit of a response to that, and to absolutely back up exactly what David is saying.
A farmer once visited me and wandered through this grocery row garden system. And he said, "You don't spray anything, do you?" And I laughed. I said, "No, I don't spray anything." And he said, "What do you do when you have pests? What do you do to control pests? I mean, let's say something is just eating a plant and it looks like it's going to kill it. What do you do?" And I told him, "I let it die."
Now there's so many things from the video that I would love to unpack, and I might save it for another day, but I do want to highlight a few of those things that I completely agree with, and I also want to make sure that you watch that video because there's a lot of fantastic things, including land race varieties. Land race varieties are incredibly exciting for the prospect that they offer for producing resilient crops. But I want to just talk about balance a bit. So in front of me here I have field beans. I adore field beans, and I'm looking at them now, and you know, there are these little beans starting to get ready, so I'm very excited for those. But field beans, broad beans, fava beans, they have, very often they can get green fly or black fly on the top. So this plant here has no top because it had a bit of green fly on, and I just pinched that out as a nice preventative measure for stopping the green fly from taking over. On the top here I can see there's a little bit of green fly, so I'm just pulling that off. And the other ones are absolutely fine. You can actually eat the tops of these, which is very nice. So this is balanced. This is very minimal intervention. It is one very simple thing that I need to do, and just from this whole plant is going to be protected from green fly. So that is where I'm very happy to go in and make a change or make an adjustment. Now over here I've got some more field beans. These are a little bit later on. At the moment these have no green fly at all whatsoever. But what I'm doing here, this is like a really important part about gardening or about polyculture, is to not put all of your eggs in one basket. So I'm not growing all of my field beans together, I'm growing them at slightly different stages. It's the same thing with tomatoes. This here is a Mountain Magic tomato. This is actually quite a good blight resistant variety. And so if you're trying to create a garden that thrives, you can actually be very clever with the type of varieties that you choose. I don't want things to kind of survive, I want things to thrive. And very often in the garden I will see something that at the moment I'm kind of keeping on top of it, but if I see something that just doesn't look happy, I'm more than happy actually pulling it out and replacing it with something else. And so at the moment there are these empty areas, but these have all been sewn up. But I want to show you just another quick example of why kind of polyculture is so important and not putting all of your eggs in one basket. So in here I had quite a big bit of gooseberry sawfly, and gooseberry sawfly is never fun. I did very little about it because every year the plants always seem to come back. I had the gooseberry harvest was nice, but the gooseberry sawfly was here, and in another location I want to show you how those gooseberries are doing. So here are our other gooseberries, and there is not a single sign of gooseberry sawfly. I had the sawfly in the kitchen garden around 4 weeks ago, and so this is just like a perfect example of, if you have a garden, even if it's a small garden, you can split things up like I'll often do a patch of garlic in one end and another patch elsewhere, just to reduce the chances of a pest or disease obliterating the whole crop, which is what happens when you have a monoculture, which is why polyculture is so important. But you know what I think is even more important than polyculture? Okay, maybe not more important, but I'd say on the same level playing field, is that a garden needs pests. So one of the most important things that David says in the video is about how he does encourage pests to be in the garden, and I completely agree. I say a garden needs pests. Very often that will raise a few eyebrows when I'm giving a talk at a local gardening group or something, but if there is no pests, there is no food source or no incentive for the predators to be there. A garden is essentially, I'd like to treat it as its own little mini ecosystem that has a nice blurred line that links in with the nature and wildlife around the place. And so I absolutely want pests in my garden, because if I have pests in my garden, I have a reason for the predators to be in my garden as well. Nature is all about balance. I always feel like to have like a thriving garden, you have to work with nature as much as possible. That is one of the core proponents of permaculture. And one of the things that I try and do to work with nature as much as possible is to then create the insect magnets, like these kind of umbellifers flowers, to encourage predator insects in, like lacewings, hoverflies. They love these kind of flowers. And in the front of me here, I'm planting up this border, which soon, in about a month, is going to be covered with colour. So I've got bergamot, Korean mint, agastache, we've got yarrows, achilles, nigella, cosmos, zinnias, calendula, and of course I had to put a little tumbling Tom cherry tomato in. But I'm creating this as like a beneficial insect border and magnet, but all of these things here and things like this are edible as well. So I don't need to sacrifice growing space to bring in the good guys. I can also form a hybrid where I'm bringing in the good guys and I'm still producing food and flavour. One thing that needs to be normalised are leaves that have little holes in them. I have a few examples around here. This nasturtium has a little hole in it. Really, if I see that, I don't care. I just think, oh, some insect has enjoyed a little bit of nasturtium. That's fine. I'm always on the lookout for when something's gonna like maybe absolutely take over, like suddenly the nasturtium is getting completely stripped. And that kind of leads into what is the role of pests and diseases in nature. So in nature, pests and diseases, they're primarily, apart from things like rabbits or deer, which will just is a whole different category, but I'm talking about more of like the smaller insect-based pests. They are there to kind of speed up the decomposition of weak plants. So if a plant is really weak, really suffering, pests and diseases will help break that back down into nutrients that can then hopefully inspire something in the future to absolutely thrive. And so for me, looking around like with the runner beans and the beetroot and seeing little holes in the leaves, I'm totally fine with that. One of the hardest skills I think I've had to learn regarding pests and diseases is to actually be patient, is to recognize if there's a problem, but to kind of just closely monitor it. And I would say in maybe 20% of scenarios, I will actually end up taking action. But in most cases, nature just needs a little bit of time because it works in a dynamic equilibrium. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time for it to catch up. And other times, if it looks like it's actually just going to be a total failure, I'd much rather just accept defeat than trying to like use all sorts of natural organic sprays to like hope that it's going to work, when I could just plant something else in its place. There's an example here. This rose, which was such a beautiful display, just before all of the flowers started to pop, I noticed every single flower head had probably about 20 aphids on across the whole rose. And I was like, there's really not much I can do here. I just left it. About a week later, every single one of those aphids, I could see the remnants of the aphids were just dead. They just died, and I had this beautiful profusion. So I just want to give you a really practical way of encouraging beneficial insects into your garden and to create that polyculture feel. And the way of doing it is by making sure that you have flowers throughout the garden. So this little corner here, this was the end of the leek bed. I've left these leeks here to run to seed because wow, do bees and butterflies love leek flowers. And then along the base here, I've got lots of food. I've got this fennel that is growing nicely. This is tree spinach, which has the most beautiful top, and I also think is one of the tastiest leaves to eat raw. I've got some half-pint peas, I've got this nasturtium underneath, and I've got some zinnias. So it's just this little kind of triangle of the bed I've dedicated to creating a bunch of colour, a bunch of interest, and different flower species, because diversity works in so many ways. A healthy garden is a diverse garden, but it's not just diversity as in like you want some vegetables, flowers and herbs. You want diversity within those categories. You want diversity of different flowers over different flowering times. And the lovely thing about herbs is that herbs also flower, so that can be added into the mix. Now this is just a general approach, or kind of my main attitude or philosophy when it comes to pests in the garden. Like here I've got this parsnip that is now setting seeds, but I use this as a way to attract insects and beneficial insects. And I really feel like if I spent less time worrying about all of the little holes in the leaves and this like odd plant here or there that might get obliterated by a pest or disease, if I worry less about those and think about the bigger problems, like this year for like so many gardeners around the UK, slugs were such a massive problem. I had to replant these runner beans, for example, because of slugs. But I know that those are a much bigger issue for me than aphids. And so for me, it's about knowing where I'm dedicating the time. What is like the 20% of pests, the category that causes 80% of the damage? This year has been slugs. And so by not worrying about everything, being quite hands-off, has given me the time to deal with the slug issue, which has now been dealt with. But it wasn't fun to start with, and you are going to get years where there is a boom of a certain population. For example, you might have a boom of voles, or you might have a boom of aphids, and it's about being willing to adapt and to respond to that. And that's where you do make a nice big difference. A thriving, healthy kitchen garden needs pests for us to get the predators, but it also needs healthy soil. You can watch this video here. If you have a healthy soil, that is the foundation of a thriving garden. And this is kind of my no-nonsense approach to ensuring that my garden soil can be as healthy as possible for healthy plants. And healthy plants also make healthy soil. It is this beautiful circle of life.